Welcome everyone. My name is Venk Shukla and I'm president of TIE. So thank you all. This is a great turnout. Very exciting, a lot of energy here. A lot more energy than we meet 50-year-olds to see in Silicon Valley. So that's pretty good. We've started doing more and more activities in the city, primarily because after a long time, San Francisco has become a hotbed of entrepreneurship, and so we need to be here. And we put together, basically it's a volunteer organization, and people raise their hands to see if you want to get involved. So if you guys want to get involved with TIE, I think just raise your hand. We have, there's a team, active team of volunteers that is putting all these events together. Ankur, where is Ankur Jain? Oh, there he is. Ankur Jain he was one of our first volunteers since you signed up for this. Aparna Sen, where is Aparna Sen? Oh, there she is. She's another very active volunteer. Smita Mittal, where is Smita? At the reception desk, yes. Thank you. And Svetlana, where is Svetlana? There you go, that's great. And she's looking for the next challenge, by the way, so if you guys are, if you have something in mind, talk to her. And finally, I think we have this concept of, this concept of 2 levels of membership. Anyone can become member. It's $150, and we do these events to see, we'll do at least 6-7 events to see in the city, right, Ankur? Yeah. This year, and there are many more events that get done in Silicon Valley. And your membership, entitles you to free attendance in all these events, and free food and great view. All those things come with membership. So I'll encourage you to do that. We put together this thing, because one of our, we have one of our charter members. He's here, and he was very strongly felt that we ought to kind of make a strategic commitment to establishing a bigger footprint in San Francisco. So Prakash, can you raise your hand, please? So Prakash is a very successful entrepreneur. Founded a company, took it public, ran it for 10 years, and now he's truly into giving back. So that's really the spirit of TIE. TIE is about, there are 2 classes of members. One is members, anybody can become a member. And the second category is charter members. Charter members are invited. And they are invited for 2 reasons. One is that they have substantial accomplishment in the past, like Prakash, and they have willingness and ability to give back. And giving back is really in terms of their time, which is the most valuable commodity. So giving back in terms of time to inspire and to put together teams like this so that we can do these events, or to spend time with an entrepreneur, mentor the person, invest in the company, help the company scale, find co-founders, find team members. That's all TIE charter members do, and we have a lot of those kind of events. TIE mission is really wealth creation through entrepreneurship. It was set up about 20 years ago. Before I give this long spiel on TIE, let me first ask, how many people know about TIE before? I should give a long spiel about TIE. So it was set up about 20 years ago, and it was set up by about 6-7 very successful entrepreneurs from South Asia region who were successful beyond their wildest dreams, and they thought that the best way for them was to give back to the community by helping the next generation of entrepreneurs. And with that spirit, TIE was born. This idea has caught fire. There are 60 chapters throughout the world, and same structure, a set of very successful people getting together to help promote the next generation of entrepreneurship. So to give you an example, in last 15 months, we have about 15-20 new charter members. 15 of them had exits of more than 100 million. So that's so once people are successful, normal place for them is to go to TIE and get involved, say, with the next generation of entrepreneurs. So, so that's what TIE does. We have a number of very interesting programs. One program is TIE Angels, which bunch of us get together to see and hear pitches from startups as you are looking for funding. It started 2 years ago. We have funded 18 companies for about $6.5 million. Total money those companies have raised is about $30 million. So, very good selection of companies. We are starting a B2B accelerator in about a couple of months. It's called TIE Launchpad. We'll have about 10 companies every, in every batch of about 6 months. We'll give them $50,000. But more important, something that no one else can do. One of our charter members would be assigned to help that company, and that person would help them open doors with the potential customers, help them recruit the team, and all those kind of things. So we'll be, looking for applications in about a month or 2 months' time. And you guys should be if you are in the mailing list, make sure you're all in the mailing list so you hear about all these the exciting things. The last thing I want to talk about is TIECon. Every year we have this annual Shindig which is the biggest conference on entrepreneurship in the world, called TIECon. It's held this year, going to be held on May 17th and 18th. We get about 3,000 to 4,000 people from about 30 countries in the world. And it really is a who's who in terms of technology professionals. So if you're in any kind of a business, any kind of thing to do with technology, TIECon is the place for you. On Saturday, we have four billionaires in the Forbes list come and talk, and one of them was a high school dropout at the age of 15. I don't know how many of you have seen this Hollywood movie, Hotel Rwanda. How many of you have seen that movie? Okay. So in that movie, this kid was one of the hostages, real hostages in that thing. He escaped and dropped out of school and stuff and started this IT company. And now he's 31, but he is worth about $2.5 billion. And he is doing amazing work throughout Africa. So he'll also be one of our speakers. In fact, he'll be speaking on the Thai Youth Forum. So very exciting conference and stuff. So I would urge you all to join. And to introduce the moderator, I'll have Raj Desai come and introduce. Raj Desai is our executive director. So any other information you need about Thai, he can provide you that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Venk. Venk Shukla, our president at TIE. Like Prakash, Venk, Ankur, all of the volunteers, it really pushes this organization, to the limits. They're all volunteers. Our board is volunteers, all full of volunteers. They're all elected by charter members. So we are really fortunate to have a very extended group of people that makes what TIE is today. 20 years later, 60 cities in the world, 18 countries, and from Portugal, Lisbon to Brussels to Dubai, London, Manchester, everywhere. We haven't gone around pushing TIE agenda anywhere. It's people in those regions that have come forward and said, we love your model, how can we do it for our community in our city? And we help them. We've created a model that works, and it's all under the same TIE brand. And basically, best practices are shared across the globe. Clearly, technology is the center here in Silicon Valley, but if you go to other chapters, you'll have all kinds of other innovations and other types of entrepreneurship that goes on. I would like to thank Rajiv and DLA Piper for giving us this beautiful facility. They've been a great supporter of TIE, and it is for that kind of support that we get this lovely facility to be able to make it accessible and easy commute for you all. So we're really glad with DLA Piper's support to be able to host our events here. In Santa Clara, we have our own facility, but clearly for a lot of you, it's a tough commute. I've come from there, so really delighted to see you all. It's fantastic to see so many of you who have not been to a TIE event before. I do hope that you will go to the website and look at our programs, and especially the TICON one that Venk mentioned. It is just an amazing agenda with over 150 speakers that are going to be participating. So hope to see many of you at our future events in the city as well as at TICON. With that, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for the evening, Ambal Balakrishnan. Very delighted to have you here. Ambal is a co-founder at Click Documents, and prior to that, she was divisional head at Cisco as well as Telecoria. She's also published a book called Content Marketing Tweet, and look it up. It's an interesting one based on how you create and market compelling content. So as you've all come here to hear her as well as marketing related subject matter, her book talks a lot about that. In her spare time, Ambal is also very involved with youth, being somebody who basically curates and mentors high school kids at and coaching elementary kids too at a variety of schools in the East Bay. Ambal has a master's in computer science from Purdue and an MBA in marketing and strategy from Wharton University. With that, let's give an applause to Ambal.
What a great turnout on a Monday evening. What a great turnout. First of all, it's my pleasure to be here on this Monday evening, and I'd like to thank Ankur and Priyanka for having me here. And it's going to be a very exciting evening, and I want all of us to start with a little exercise. So if you'd humor me, I want all of us to stand up. Every one of us. And we're going to do this. I'm going to say you, and when I say you, I mean your company, your business, whether it's a startup or a big company, or just somebody that you know, right? Okay, so if you have a blog, sit down. If you have a social media, and again by you I mean you or anybody that you know, or your business or company or anything. If you have any social media account, which is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, please sit down. You guys standing up still? If you guys have a website or a newsletter, sit down. And the ones that are standing, I just want them to kind of crouch down a little bit, just humor me for a bit. And is anybody standing up still, except me? I have to sit down. Is anybody? I want all of you guys to look around and look for that brave soul who is still standing up. Who is that person? Can you put up your hand? I'd like to meet that person because I want to ask that person, where the heck have you been? Where the heck have you been? Right? So we all know that we live in a very, very cluttered world. There is content being created and content being consumed. Is that not right? There is. And content is just being created multifold every day. And we all want to market our businesses, market our brands, market various different things. How do we do that when there's so much clutter in the market? We have an expert sort of panelist here to answer these questions for us today. I'm very delighted to introduce you to them. And Christina, take it away with your introduction, please.
Hi, I'm Chrissy. I'm a writer at VentureBeat, which is a tech blog based here in Silicon Valley. And we cover kind of technology, business, entrepreneurship. I specialize in my beat in health IT and enterprise, but also very interested in startup culture.
Hi, I'm Matt. I run a boutique PR and marketing shop called Fluid PR. Before that, I ran marketing for a few different startups, none of which you've probably heard of. We'll get into that later.
Hi, my name is David Yin, and I'm currently the head of market intelligence at Eventbrite, which is an online platform for anyone to create an event and sell tickets online. So maybe Ty can use event, right? Coming up sometime soon. Just had to put it out there. Prior to that, I actually spent my entire career in consumer goods, and I most recently was at Avon in New York City, and before that I was out here at Clorox in the Oakland area.
Hi everyone, my name is Rishi. I'm the co-founder of a startup around here called Soch. Soch is an app and a website that helps people find cool things to do. And prior to that, I was a senior PM at Slide and Google. And before that, I was an astrophysics researcher at NASA. So kind of made a big jump there.
Great. I want to first of all thank the expert panels for being here on a Monday evening. Let's give a big round of applause for that. Here's what we're going to do. We want to start slowly. Let's do it. And then go fast. Come on, let's do it. Thank you guys for being here on a Monday evening and spending this time with us today. So the first question is, what are some new trends in marketing and PR that you're seeing? Who'd like to start us off?
All right, so PR and marketing. PR, and I have a sort of interesting relationship with PR. It's sort of, on the one hand, the bane of my existence, and I get 800 emails a day. And on the other, I don't know how I would even find out about any startups without, the really good work that a few PR folks do. One of the trends that I've seen more recently is very, very, very early stage startups being actually able to afford PR and setting aside budget for it. And on the other side, I see a lot of kind of much smaller boutique PR firms who sprout up to meet that demand, and they often will, they'll have PR at cheaper prices that startups can afford. So, in the old days, you might get approached by a founder, and now you're getting approached by that founder's PR agency. So I think that it does take, a lot of founders are busy, totally understand that, and it means that they don't have to sort of worry as much about getting their message out. But it also kind of has led to often, us feeling like we don't have the same relationships, direct relationships with founders that we used to.
So as one of those PR people, I thank you for reading your 800 emails every day and getting back to us when it makes sense. So one of the trends that I've noticed, and it's, I won't say necessarily an emerging trend, it's been around a long time, but it's definitely a trend where it's continuing to get stronger and stronger as we go along, is accountability in your marketing. Right? I forget who it was who said, I know that half of my advertising works, I just don't know which half. Nowadays, we do know. We know exactly what's working. We're able to track it all the way through, from the point when we first get someone as a new prospect, all the way through to watching them become a customer, and then a loyal customer, and an ambassador eventually. So just having a lot of the tools in place to make that happen.
Excellent technology, Matt. The technology that we have today. That's what.
Absolutely, yeah. So just having access to those tools and that technology has made a world of difference.
So my role in marketing is probably a little bit different than you guys would traditionally think of as a marketing role. So my whole career has been in market intelligence and consumer insights. And it's always been really important in the organizations that I've worked in, because we help our organizations to understand who our customers are and then it'll leverage that information in our marketing and send the right message and find the right person and so forth. And one of the trends that I've really seen in the last several years is that it used to be that market research or consumer insights work was very, very expensive. And only very large corporations could afford it, especially at this quantitative level of understanding consumers. And nowadays, there's two impacts. One is that the technology, you don't need as much broad scale research because you can actually find a lot of that information yourself. The other thing is actually also through technology, obviously, but the cost of market research has been brought down a lot by the internet. And so there are a lot of new services that entrepreneurs can use to really better understand their customers and their marketplace so they can make smarter marketing choices. For example, Google launched a service that I've been testing and I was on a pilot for called Google Consumer Surveys. And what they're doing is they're trying to monetize content by inserting a consumer research question in front of premium content. And it allows, in a very powerful and inexpensive way, for you to reach out and understand your potential consumers, give them options to choose from, what message might work better, what makes them tick. And having that information makes you a better and stronger marketer because you can craft whatever your message is around actual information instead of back in the day when we used to have to just guess.
You might have heard a lot of people talk about, a new trend that I've seen. You've heard a lot of people talk about sensors, right? Now there's more types of sensors on our phones, and where people are, when they're there, who they are, et cetera, et cetera. That movement has given rise to a lot of just stockpile of data that allows us to obviously track and hold accountable who's my user, where are they, when are they opening things up, how good are they, so to speak. But it's also given rise to an interesting type of company, which is something that looks like what one of us works on, which is a locally based company, a company that worries about finding normal people in a given market, figuring out how they move around, because that data is new in the last several years, and trying to use that data to craft better experiences, which has led to a rise in people returning to real world or out of home marketing, but treating it in a way that's very different. So my startup, Soch, looks at and evaluates events and billboards and all sorts of things, because we're based in San Francisco and we have a lot of users in this city that use Soch. But we're trying to use them as performance ad and performance marketing sort of tools, whereas Coca-Cola and the other people buying them are not. And so I think it's kind of interesting to see how the power of the blog and the writer has been as strong as ever, but there's also now all these other inputs that I would encourage people to go out and reevaluate. A small test that we ran as a company was, we said if we throw bus ads up inside of muni buses, everyone hates riding the bus, but if we throw them up, would that be a positive thing? Could we figure out who people, what people are hearing about our message that way, and how good of a user that is? And every tech person I asked said, that's a stupid idea, don't do it. And you go out and you test it, you create vanity URLs, you do all this stuff you need to do, look at IPs and when people are creating stuff, and you realize it's a fantastic thing to do because no one else is doing it. And so I think just being able to kind of find your way between what are people not looking at and what kind of data do I have to create performance-based advertising or PR metrics or marketing out of anything, I would say go out and do that, because marketing is a lot of times about being different and trying new things. So.
That's great. Thank you all for the feedback. The next question I have is, given the ad cluttered market that we live in, how do startups get visibility? Because there's so much of ads, so much of content, so much of clutter. How do startups really get visible? What do they have to do?
Well, one option is that you do your traditional PR campaign and you get articles in the press, and there are more media outlets than ever before. Another is that I really recommend is to put up your own blog, even if you're a very early stage startup and there's not a ton of traffic yet to your website. Having a voice in that way, I think, is going to turn you into a thought leader. And if you wanted to say write a guest post that was republished on a tech blog, having that experience will help. So that's kind of one thing. It's even we're struggling with this. There's just there's so much content.
And your beat.
Yeah, we struggle. Just to even get our own articles seen. So I would even say, don't be afraid to take a strong point of view about something. If I was to write a very positive piece about your startup and put it out tomorrow, probably 1,000 people would read it. If you were to take some hard line on a controversial topic and really express how you feel, 100,000 people could read it. So I would say don't be afraid to be public and be visible. One last suggestion is, I don't know if any of you guys have used Quora. I have this amazing kind of weird use for Quora, which is that I use it as a quote database. So if I ever want to get in touch with some founder at the last minute and they're not picking up the phone, go to Quora and I look at the questions that they've been answering, and that's my way of I can directly quote them and link back to Quora. So maybe I shouldn't disclose that as a professional secret. But yeah, keep writing and have a voice.
So I think the short answer to that is how do startups get visible?
Visible, yes.
Do something remarkable, right? I mean, it sounds trite, but it's true. I mean, you guys are all, or mostly entrepreneurs here, build something remarkable. People will notice. In lieu of that, the not so trite answer is to find your community, to find where your audience is hanging out, and go hang out with them. That in person, at events. That could be on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn groups. But go there, become part of the community, and have something to say. take a stance, have a unique point of view, be a little controversial if you need to be, or you're in a position to be, and people will start to take notice, and that'll sort of build upon itself, and you'll find that your visibility has sort of grown organically.
This like going in an order format's really hard. Because I know exactly. I'm a little bit like whatever they said. Just to couch it in a little bit of a different way, though, too. There are two pieces. One from each of you that I want to grab onto, and one is add value back to the world, right? So like this whole sense of thought leadership, helping people to understand what whatever the world is that your product's connected to better by being an expert in that space, and like taking that information that you're gathering for your business and putting it out there in front of other people as well so they can benefit from it also, and then that always just brings good things back to you, right? It's that whole like golden cycle of I want to help other people, they will want to help me as well. People are always interested in whatever's going on around them, especially in certain business segments. I think the other thing is, and you've already touched upon this, but it's definitely the idea of find the right people that you want to be visible with. Like don't try to be visible to everyone, right? Like if your company's in a certain space, like definitely think hard about who is out there that should know about you and how do you reach them, and then funnel all of your effort there. Don't try to become a household name overnight. That's the quickest way to like burning all of your cash and getting nowhere.
Yeah, the way we sort of, in my experience, have seen some success in kind of doing all of those things is we really just focus on retention of our users. That was the single greatest marketing thing that we sort of stumbled on, which is people listen to people, like kind of duh, right? That's like why we all are here in social media, whatever. But people listen to people, and so what we focus on is when anyone comes through the door, we would rather, and I was just having a conversation with someone about like, force them to Facebook Connect so we know exactly who they are, so the product is amazing on day one, so they come back on day two, and then they come back again and again. And if you can do that, then you have a bunch of people just kind of mentioning your company out there, your product out there, and it's kind of the same thing as find the community and go get them, or build them, right? And make sure you're keeping them. And I think that's the main thing, which is make every one of your little efforts to go get someone pay doubly or quadruple by just building something remarkable that people are going to continue to flip open week after week after week. That was probably the biggest thing for us. So.
Great.
Oh yeah, good call. We're taking a stand.
Great. The next question I have is, what types of marketing have you found the most effective? Because there is marketing dollars and marketing time, and you can only do so much. And there's always feedback from the press, blogs, the marketing community on do this and do that, and be the blogs and do the Facebook and do the Twitter, do the webinars. What is most effective in your opinion? And how does, and in case, and I understand that there's no one single answer. So if I were a startup, how would I find the answer to that question? Could you comment on that?
You go first.
You wanted to go first?
So, I think speaking from the perspective of a really early stage startup, I think one of the things that we've sort of seen some success with and focused on early on was there is a sea of sort of quote marketing that you can do out there, and you'll get very distracted trying to do it all, and you'll see people create viral videos, and you'll see people do TV ads and have a billboard in Times Square and do all sorts of stuff that you want to figure out how should I spend time doing. And the one piece of advice that I would give people is I would encourage people to think about performance and measuring, and if you're thinking about something that you cannot measure, just don't do it for now. You can afford to do that later. And so the answer actually changes from startup to startup or company to company in terms of what is the single best thing. If you're B2B, you should be doing conferences and press, and if you're thinking about consumers or whatever, then you should be thinking about other channels. But I mean, I think my advice to early stage startups is try a bunch of stuff, measure ruthlessly, see the things that you can see returns from, because yeah, we saw a vague bump on some day, and like I can't tell you what that half the marketing, where people came from. That's fine, that's great, but if you can't get insights on it, you can afford to table it. There's enough things out there that you'll be able to actually say, advertising to this blog community was great, or presenting at that specific conference really paid dividends. We could measure that, we could see how good those users are. Let's double down on that. So
This is a really hard question to answer because once again, every context is different. There's no one right vehicle. It's not like I'm going to stand up here and preach Facebook to you guys. I think the thing that you have to really keep in mind is who is it you're trying to target and where are they going to be and what are their behaviors are like the most important things to think about, right? Like if you're trying to hit a customer for a particular product type, what are they using today? And how do you get in front of that behavior so that you can make your marketing as effective as possible? It has to be relevant to somebody, right? So if you're, for example, like if you're targeting people who are in cities and like have a lot of dead time because they're on public transportation, like buses are great because you know that people are waiting and need something to do and it's an effective thing to do. Or if they have an existing behavior that's exactly the same as what you want them to do, but you just want them to do it with you, like how do they find out about that thing that they were already using and just get them to switch over, like just get them to make that one little change. Marketing is really hard when you want someone to make a drastic change from what they're doing today. That behavior change is where you waste a ton of money. Find something that's really close and go after that person to just kind of slightly tweak what they're doing today, and that can make your marketing a lot more effective than any flashy campaign on television that everyone wants to ultimately end up doing.
So I would say, for most startups, the two biggest problems that you're going to have, are kind of these last two questions. One is how do you get visibility, and the other one is how do you get credibility, right? It's one thing to have your name out there, and that's great and all, but you're a startup. No one's ever heard of you. Why should they trust you? Why should they believe you? I wish I had an answer as to like there's a formula for making that happen. There's not, but there are start producing content, I think is probably the best way. Do the webinars, publish a research paper, do surveys, just publish a blog post on best practices. Case studies are probably the best way you could do that because people are going to believe your customers way before they believe you about anything. So tap into your customers to get testimonials or formal case studies going as soon and as often as you can. And yeah, just start building your credibility.
I definitely agree on the customer case studies. I love me some case studies. They're awesome. So probably I would say that you are a big asset to your startup, and just getting your face out there and your name out there, taking a stance like we talked about before. We also do sort of marketing. VentureBeat does marketing because every time we write a story, we want to get a big audience for those stories. So I'm always looking at, we're posting on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm always looking at what headlines kind of resonate most with people. And it's amazing. It's so often it's nobody cares about Box and their momentum from 2012. What they care about is that it's a 27-year-old founder, and that this guy just has raised $250 million in funding, and that's an amazing story. It's like this young kid who's just built up this company in Silicon Valley that's doing so well. So people will resonate with that, and they resonate, and they like to look at an image of his face, and they like to hear what he's his advice and what he has to say. So if you're at an early stage company, probably your startup idea is going to change 3 times, or 2 or 3 times in the next year. So don't be too wedded to the kind of exact kind of message of what you currently do. Think about you and how to get yourself out there, and people love reading about people. So
great. My next question is this. Each of you guys have a business or a company that you're associated with, and that has a particular target audience. So can you get into a little bit specifics of who is your target audience and one successful way that you've used to reach them? So we've kind of spoken about general right now, so let's just drill down a little deeper and give some examples of your target audience and how you reach them.
Well, our target audience is people that are interested in technology and entrepreneurship, and that used to be a very small kind of segment, mainly based here in Silicon Valley. And in the last year or so, we've really built our audience to become a global one. And people like to think that tech entrepreneurship is going to be, a solution that's going to create a lot of jobs and is going to, stimulate the economy in general. So we now try to reach kind of more of that audience, and what it's meant is that we've had to kind of change the way that we write from being insidery to kind of explaining everything. It's been interesting to see how our kind of readership has recently sort of increased and how it's changed. So that's sort of one thing that we're focused on right now is how do we kind of bring this message of entrepreneurship to the world.
Great.
Well, so I have a number of clients, But I'll talk about one client in particular, and it's a client who I was in-house with before I started this business. I was the head of marketing for a company called Tapjoy. And they advertised to two very distinct audiences. One are mobile app developers. And to reach those guys, it's a lot of face-to-face. It's a lot of, they must sponsor so many, and there's like a gaming event every week around here, it seems like, and Tapjoy sponsors just about all of them. But there's nothing quite like that, just face-to-face interaction, being able to show the product, talk about it, put your best salespeople out there, and close deals. Lately, they've shifted a little bit, and they've been marketing more directly to the consumer. So they're trying to market to mobile gamers. And we found that trying to build a community is probably the best way to market to them. It's going out on Facebook, on Twitter, creating their own sort of community platform, and just giving them a voice. Being kind of humorous about it, a little bit irreverent, and just creating a forum where these people come and find out about new fun games to play. So that's worked really well.
So it's a community, Matt. It's a community.
Yep.
So for Eventbrite, this is actually a really tough challenge because we're not a traditional sort of just consumer platform immediately. You have to find people who organize events. Like when I was saying earlier about finding a behavior, like anyone can organize an event, but it actually takes a lot of guts, a lot of gumption, a lot of initiative to organize an event, and finding the people who are doing that can be really difficult, especially in all the different spaces that we're in. We are a platform for everything from bike races to music festivals to classes, and so all of these are very different target audiences, and ultimately what has to happen is we have to make some choices about what are the specific ones we want to go after and investing in those specifically. And each one of them has a sort of a different flavor to it. We found the same exact vehicle can be very different depending on the particular target audience that we're looking for. So in that particular case, then it's just trying things. And once again, going through what that event organizer's individual behavior is within their segment. Where are they going? What are they looking for? Who are they talking to? Who do they look up to? And then by finding out that information, you can then target them better, right? By being in the places where they read things, being in the places where they go, and having the right message at the right time for the right person. Separately, another audience that we are starting to build out as well is that we have all this great content on Eventbrite. We want to help people find Eventbrite events. And where are people looking for events today was something that we thought a lot about with our agencies in terms of putting up ads in places where people are already looking for things to do. Like how do you, once again, just kind of help them nudge over into letting them know, there's not any one place to look for things to do, right? There's always many places to look for things to do, and helping them to then guide back to Eventbrite as an additional place for them to look for things to do.
Yeah, I think one thing we did is we realized our target audience are the friends of our current audience. And so, yeah, obviously we wanted to build a great product that they're going to tell their friends about and all of that. But we did a couple of things. So one, the fundamental thesis of a company like mine is you rarely ever do cool things alone. Cooking classes, whiskey tastings, whatever. So can we be a part of when you're inspired to the actual communication to the rest of those folks, and kind of built that into the product. But the second thing we did was we said, can we actually go build a physical community out of the people who we have, and can we do something cool enough that they'll want to bring the people they know? And so we did a lot of kind of insidery
online
events,
or
actually literally physical events. Like we did a series of rooftop screenings of Hitchcock films, right? And it's free if you're a social member, and it's like, wow, that's remarkable, and I really want to bring my friend, and 80% of the time your friend is not yet a member of our site, and so it's a great way to get in front of them. So, just thinking about, again, from a consumer standpoint, our target audience were the friends of our audience, and just trying to think about how does that play into what we do, the choices we make.
So Rishi, the next question is, which one book or blog do you recommend for marketing? Which is the one that you found most effective? And I know this is a tough question, and if you have more than one, feel free to just add 2 or 3.
That's a tough question for me. I think the single greatest tool in my toolkit when it comes to marketing, when it comes to building products, and in fact, when it comes to company building and hiring and everything, is empathy. And I think empathy is the single most undervalued skill in all of Silicon Valley. People look for smart people who have straight A's and whatever. And I think people who, when you're talking to them, can tell that you're getting bored and will change the subject, that's an extremely valuable skill. And so, what we try to do is emphasize that in all of our marketing, and we try to just think about how can we go out and figure out what our users are doing and thinking, and how busy are they when they're opening our app, et cetera. And so I think the books that I end up reading as a result are actually psych textbooks rather than anything specifically about marketing.
That's
so,
great.
Robert Cialdini is a really well-known, to give an easy one, is like a really well-known psychologist who had this book called Influence, 7 Principles for sort of influencing other people. And it's a great read. It's from the 70s, so it's clearly dated, and you take it with a grain of salt.
And they do have a few marketing examples in that book, if I remember.
In fact, they do, yeah. And so I think just training yourself, even when building products and obviously when marketing, to do a lot of what you guys have been talking about, which is just think about who your user is, and then take the second level step of like, what is that user thinking, and like how busy are they, and where do their eyes rest when they're in a busy mall or whatever, and how can I take advantage of that? So empathy and I guess psychology textbooks.
I'm going to echo a lot of what you've just said, because that's my whole line of work, is to get into our consumers' minds, understand what makes them tick, and then using that to build and craft the right product and message. The books that I was going to recommend, I actually come from a very traditional background, so old school, CPG, an industry that's still catching up to some of the things that technology is doing in a lot of ways. But I think a lot of the base principles are still very valid and very important, especially from a branding perspective and how people process brands. The 2 books that I always recommend to people in general as like just great sort of marketing texts that are like old school but still like tried and true. One is Positioning by Rees and Trout. Did I just take it's as you can attest as well. It's just a great read in terms of like being able to understand like what is a brand to someone, how to think about it, how to build clarity around it. It's great examples of old brands that we're all familiar with and how they built themselves and what they're built upon and what the guts of a brand really is. So I'll leave that for now. You talk more about it if you would like. The other one is actually in reference to what you're talking about. It's called Why We Buy by Paco Underhill. For people who are in technology, it's a little less relevant directly, but it's a great read in the sense that all this man did was take thousands of hours of video footage of people shopping, and then he watched them. And he watched what they did, and watched where they went, and what made them stop whatever they were doing, and what made them start what they were doing. Like one of the things that I thought was just amazing is, he really turned it back, and when you're reading it, you're like, oh my gosh, I do that. Like, and that's just so powerful for the empathy piece, and just having to make sure that you think through what your customer's experience is going to be. Like one of my favorite examples from that book is when you walk into a store, the first 15 feet are dead. No one reads anything in the first 15 feet of a store.
Why is that, David? Why is that?
You're just in such a hurry, according to the book. He's the expert, not I. You're in such a hurry to get in.
I'm finding it interesting this guy took videos and stalked people in the shopping market.
He just took also like security camera footage from retailers and whatnot. Just watched hours and hours of footage. He and his team, they actually have a consultancy, I believe, still, that does this stuff. I would go crazy, but it's amazing what you can learn just by watching and really thinking about why someone's doing something. But in the first 15 feet of a store, people are in such a hurry just getting inside, and there are people behind you, and you're like trying to figure out where you even are. You're not reading anything. Right? And so that's just such a powerful thing that he observed, and it's a great insight. And so if you put a sign up for your big sale in front of your store, no one's reading it. Like they're going to get beyond it before they even know that there was a sign there. And I think that there are things like that you can draw analogies for technology or other kinds of small companies, just being very aware of what's really happening so that you can maybe leverage that for some reason. Maybe the first sign that's really big shouldn't appear until 15 feet in the store, and then everyone sees it, right? Because like, oh, I know where I am. Oh, there's this sign, So.
Yeah, there are analogies to that if you think about it online too.
Totally.
You know how we say that the right-hand side of a web page is where the ads are?
Mm-hmm.
That, now we've learned to tune that out. We don't look at that anymore. So that's a bad spot. That's just great. That's great.
Yeah, but it's a great read, and anyone can empathize with it. Everyone's had that experience with shopping, and so it's a great sort of jumping off point for starting to think that way and having that experience.
Well, I really got to shift gears here, because that was Positioning was the one
glad
I was going to recommend, which is kind of odd because I wouldn't think too many people would pick that out. It's kind of an old school book, and but I totally validate everything you just said, and it's great. It'll get you to think about how your product kind of fits into the overall market. And it helps, I think, not just from a marketing perspective, but from like a product development perspective too, right? Like, you have to build something that actually has a place in the market, otherwise what's the point? So otherwise, I guess I'll just mention a book that I am in the process of rereading now, and I'm probably going to date myself, but I read it the first time it came out in like 95 or 96, The Cluttered Manifesto. Has anybody read that before? Is that still popular even? I mean, I don't know. When it first came out, it was really popular, and it kind of like got a lot of people to think about like, wow, the internet is actually pretty powerful. And the whole point is just that people are in control now. Like marketers, companies, you guys, we're not in control of anything. People are in control, and you have to talk to them like they are real people, right? They are. I mean, you can't. I hate going to a website and it's just full of jargon and like, halfway through thick paragraphs and like, I can't even read it because I don't know what it's saying. And I think a lot of startups, especially more like enterprise-y, techie kind of startups, are probably more guilty of this. Talk to people as if they're real people, and they'll listen, and you'll get a lot farther that way.
So you guys have recommended some great reads, so I guess I'll take some of the blogs. Might even have to mention some competition here. Yeah, so one of the things that I write a lot about is how the role of the marketer has changed. And I think in one sense it's good to have sort of grounding in psychology and understanding kind of how to market products, but marketers have to be super techie now. And they're the ones that are sort of buying all these analytics and big data products. They have the budget for it. Sometimes I'll see, a job listing and it says you have to have 3 programming languages and it's for a marketing associate. It's insane. So I would also recommend reading some of the tech blogs. I think Mashable is a good one for marketing. I think there's another one called Marketing Profs, and then there's CMO, which are kind of geared towards marketers. And then, obviously, shout out to VentureBeat. We have a marketing writer, John Coetzee, who does also write kind of stories for marketers, and often along the lines of, what new technologies are sort of worth picking up. So yeah, peruse the blogs too.
Great. The last question I have is, what is your one advice for entrepreneurs in marketing, for marketing?
Probably biggest piece of advice, and I would have to say, I think having a PR agency is a good thing for any startup, and it's a big question you're going to have to
Matt
ask
paid you to
yourself.
say that, did he not?
Yes. But, sorry, Matt. I would also really recommend, actually, at the very earliest stages, doing a lot of these efforts yourself. And reaching out to, when you do your own pitching, doing it yourself. It's like, if you were contacting a VC, would you have your assistant do it? Like, it's the same thing with press. So think about what kind of message you want to send. Just be honest, introduce yourself, talk about why you're passionate, why this startup that you're doing is going to change the world. And I think at the very earliest stages, it's going to have a lot more impact. So I would say kind of don't hand things off before you, are so busy that you don't even have any other choice. Keep it close to the vest.
So that's from a PR guy. That's actually great advice. And a lot of times I will tell my clients, that hey, feel free, you can reach out to them too, or I'll make an introduction and say, Dean, can I introduce you to my client so and so, and let them take it from there. Because you're right, journalists, more often than not, don't really want to hear from me. I'm just kind of the middleman. So a piece of advice that I was going to offer tonight is to take it slowly, to not go out into the market until you're ready. A lot of times people will come to me or they'll talk about how I want to get coverage in VentureBeat, or I want to go sponsor this event or whatever, and well, all right, where's the product? Well, it's an alpha right now, but it's a great product, you have to believe me. And it just doesn't work. I mean, you've blown your credibility before you've ever even gotten started. So be careful there, and don't overhype your product too. I mean, we've seen this a lot of times where they go out with a set of messaging that this is going to totally change the world, or at least their little niche in the world, and the expectations are so high that when people actually go and play with the product, they're disappointed. So. Let the hype kind of bubble up naturally, and that'll just carry a lot more weight than if you're the one out there kind of being your own cheerleader.
I'd say the most important thing is to get smart about your market, right? Like there's so much accessible information nowadays. Market research is getting cheaper and cheaper. Like you can be so smart for so little money and effort nowadays that spend that little extra time learning a little bit more about the space that you're in, figuring out who the heaviest consumer you think might be is, right? Like for event going, there's like the people who go to like more events than anybody else. How do you figure out who that person is, how many they're going to, and like figure out what makes them tick so you can deliver them the best marketing and product, right? I think that ultimately at the end of the day, having that kind of holistic information about your marketplace and your consumer just makes you that much better off your arms to go into the marketplace and fight that battle and get attention.
Yeah, I already kind of used my number one, unfortunately, which is empathy. I mean, it's just, think a lot and think hard about your user and what they do. But I mean, the second part of that is keep it simple. What we try to do, what I try to do, is come up with the most simple, sort of short phrasing that I can. I guess the simplest, shortest phrasing that I can, to get out of the word. And think about how that shapes what the product does, what it delivers. A great example of that is MP3 players are floating around. At some point, Apple markets 1,000 songs in your pocket. Makes sense to my dad, makes sense to me. It's very simple and very human. And then take that and make it something, work on it, something that's memorable. Use that to inform what you're building. Use that to inform what you're saying to people, whether it's in person or through the press or whatever. It's funny because when we're like fundraising, as entrepreneurs, people tell us, oh, you should come up with an X for Y, like an Eventbrite for farms or something, whatever. And the reason you do that is because the market here, like VCs, are very busy, and they need to walk away with something memorable so they can like come back to their partners and someone asks him, what did Rishi do? And he's like, oh yeah, it was like crazy, it was Eventbrite for farms. I mean, crazy enough to just at least remember. And so just use that same lesson, which is, what is that one thing that someone's going to remember? It's got to be short and memorable, and probably your users are giving you much less attention than a partner in a meeting. So it's got to be, it has to really intuitively resonate as well. So keep it simple. Just emphasize the empathy part of that as well.
Great. This is all great advice. Thank you. At this point of time, I'd like to take it over to you, and please shoot your questions, whatever's top of your mind, to our expert panelists over here. Who is the first person who's going to ask the great question? Yes, great. Thank you.
Talking about your friends of friends, just purely personal curiosity, how did the date night campaign work with the buses?
Can you repeat the question just a second?
He was talking about how they ran a bus campaign which was very innovative and stood out really well. That's how I know who they are.
Oh, okay.
But one of the panels that they were using was, let us give you great date night suggestions. And so I was just wondering how well that one played.
Yeah, no, the question was, you've seen our actual marketing and how well did kind of the date night stuff, like, for a company like Soch, we market it pretty broadly as find cool things to do, and yet 90% of people come in and click looking for a date night, which is an amazing actual use case, right? Because you guarantee to rope in one other person. And so, right, exactly. And so, a lot of the phrasing, one of the things I tell our team is to always keep it positive, right? It's really easy for like a startup like mine to play into something called FOMO, fear of missing out. Or it's really easy as a nonprofit to play on people's fears and they're feeling bad that they're not participating. But a great example is Charity Water that keeps it very simple. Their slogan is water changes everything, not you're an asshole for having water for yourself and all these people are dying. It's water changes everything. It's a very positive message. And so I think what we try to do with our messaging is keep positive, but yeah, we actually do focus it on group activities or things that are going to help people use our product successfully, and that is the single most successful thing that people use. Yeah.
Do I need this?
Just go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi. So there tends to be a lot of biases when it comes to the data that you guys collect. to determine your marketing decisions. At what point, I don't want to say paralysis by analysis, because I think it goes deeper than that, because you're basing your entire strategy off of something that is market intelligence. And I love data. I'm a huge data nut, but like you can get lost right into it, and then until you get your positive R squared before you're like, oh well, this is now I've got all the variables, and then you end up making a decision. So how do you measure and balance the data that you have, exclude your own biases, and still target whatever market that you guys want to target?
That one's got to be for you.
That's actually a little bit tough for me to answer. This is very different than the last mic, because I am not one of our executional marketers, so my role is actually data gathering to like help them inform what choices they're going to make, and then they do a lot of their own measurements separately. But I think that the big things to keep in mind are really just like, what are you ultimately trying to do? Like, have an objective up front, and then focus on moving whatever that was. Because it's really easy to get distracted by like all the things you could move, right? But at the end of the day, like for us, like, are we moving orders? Are we moving connects? Are we moving like the fundamental things that we think are going to grow our business versus just like, you know, you can measure traffic till you're blue in the face, but is it doing anything, right? Like, really think clearly about what the things are that you need to move, and move just those.
Yeah, I would actually pretty much echo that, and I would say that there's two things you need to make good decisions at a startup. One is data, and the other is an actual point of view. If you only have data and you're only optimizing things, you're just going to build a marginally better something. And it's actually, you know, to your point, it's very hard to convince someone to change to doing that. And so you need to balance. You can't just be this worldview guy with like crazy ideas. You need to balance, you know, an actual worldview with then the ability to go out and figure out, is that resonating? Is that working? At what point were people falling off, and what message were they seeing and clicking on? What were they responding to, and what weren't they? And then like the truth of the matter is you have to actually just get good at analysis, or find someone who is, you know, and understand the difference between leading indicators versus lagging indicators, and understand, you know, statistical significance, like you said. And so you don't want to make decisions off of the first 20 data points because you're really excited that we just launched this, you know, landing page. You have to understand at what point you have enough data. So it's kind of balancing those two things, having a worldview. And sometimes you'll actually measure something. You'll say this version was 20% worse. And it's okay to actually say, you know what, I'll take 20% worse if it echoes the values of my company, or if it echoes the message that, you know, feels right, because, you know, there's going to be a lot of different funnels you're going to look at, and if you maximize every single one, you make ugly products that are all red, blinking, you know.
A quick follow-up, just to iterate, like, how do you compensate for the blind spots if you have your point of view, which both of you kind of echoing? What if your point of view is wrong? Like, would the data speak to something that goes
precisely? I think that's where you sort of, you know, we all have crazy ideas, right? That's why no one's done what we've done before already. And so you are using the data to sort of help you understand, oh, am I correct? You know, and does this look like it's working? And you have to be very realistic about it. I don't know if that's helpful,
sure,
but I think just keeping in mind as you're digging into the data, like, what is that objective? What is that thing that we set out to do? And how can I get to the answer, is that resonating or not? Rather than, oh, like, look, this is interesting behavior, you know, like, it's good. It's good to notice those things and pick up on them. Sometimes you double down on them, but also just understand what you're trying to do.
If I could, I would just add to that. Don't always believe the data, right? I mean, you know, data can tell any story you want it to, and, you know, people can always kind of sway one way or the other based on the same set of data. So, you know, just take it for what it's worth, I guess.
Our main source of data is page views, and if we relied entirely on those, I don't think I would be writing about anything else but porn and Nintendo Wii U takedowns. You know, we also have to be cognizant of what the long-term vision is for what we're doing, and you know, often it's more important to write that story about, you know, the baby that was functionally cured by HIV, or, you know, how big data was relevant in the war in Afghanistan. And that kind of story might not get a ton of hits, but it's important to what we're trying to do. And maybe that 1,000 or 2,000 people that did read that story are gonna, you know, think better of us. And those are the relationships that we want to build. So we trust the data, but we don't let it drive everything that we do.
This question is for Matt and Christina. So I'm trying to understand, like, first, like for you, like when you mentioned you get 800 emails, like how do I make my emails stand out? And for you, maybe if you can give some insider tips, how do you reach these guys and all the popular blogs? I'm a mobile developer, and I'm like the challenge I face is, I think you asked, is how do you make your app stand out? So like if you could talk about how Tapjoy right now in the App Store, Android, iPhone, how do you make the app stand out? And then another question to your point was when you said that don't do marketing when you have an alpha product, but all these lean philosophies have been saying that do marketing first, get enough users, and then build the product. So what stage does marketing, product development, how does that go hand in hand?
Okay, so that is a big question. Is how do you stand out in a crowded inbox? I think first thing is if you have an investor, somebody that's kind of supporting you, I would have them make an introduction. Okay, so that's fine. I would probably just think about I'm always looking for a news hook, and every blogger is. So don't just send me an email and say, hey, I've got a really cool startup, because there are lots of startups. But if you've got a news hook, which is usually you're about to get funding, maybe you have an opinion that you'd like to share, and I could sort of whittle that into a piece of news, or maybe even suggest a guest post. Or it might be that you have a new product that's coming out, or you're launching, for example. So think about that, and then reach out when the timing is right. And I'm always looking for those types of news hooks. And then if you really want me to love you a lot, then you could offer me an exclusive.
So I would definitely echo that. It's aside from hiring a great PR guy who can help make sure your email gets read, don't tell them about your. I feel like I'm really loud right now.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like very like whoa.
Don't tell them about your product and why it's so great. Tell them about the story that it tells. Give them the news hook that she was talking about. To answer the other part of your question, I'm not saying don't at all market your product in alpha, although there are times when you might not want to. I'm saying, don't be too aggressive with it. I think PR is probably not the right tactic to be doing for a product at such an early stage, unless there is a really interesting story. You have some famous co-founder, or whatever it is that people would find interesting. But find other ways of putting some type of content out there, hosting some kind of fun, I hate sweepstakes, but hosting something fun that will get people to basically give you their email address, to want to hear more about it as you go along, and start collecting people, potential users and email addresses that way, as opposed to going out and making a big splash before the product is really ready.
And for the mobile apps, how do you make, with the App Store, like I'm trying to put out my app, how do I make that like stand out, get users downloading?
Oh boy, that's a big question. Well, read a great description. You're talking about an app that's already live?
Or in the future, like how do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, so
besides the things you mentioned, any other, especially for once you put it on the App Store?
Yeah.
Only the first 100.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole industry has grown up. App Store optimization. It's the new SEO, right? And it's just as shady as the old SEO. What I tell people is forget about like all these tricks that they've heard. Just write a really good description that lays out your value prop and explains why people should download it. Encourage all your friends and family to go give you 5-star reviews, right? And hope that it kind of builds from there. But we can talk later about more specifics.
You have one here. First of all, yeah, I believe that credibility and empathy is the best marketing strategy. But the question is for you. Some people say that launching the app early or launching your product early is a better strategy. But you are saying that launching it when it's completely done, that's a better strategy. So why there are two different views? Does it depend on the domain that you are working on, or is there any other factors to be considered for that?
Well, and again, I don't mean to say you have to wait until it's fully baked. You know, a lot of my clients have launched in beta, and I think that's actually an appropriate time. I mean, by the time it's in beta, you have, you know, at least a half-baked product. You're ready to go out and start getting customers in the funnel, and you know, your story is pretty well ready to be told. You know, my point is you don't want to go out there too early. You don't want to, you don't want to have too many users before, you know, you're ready to scale the system so they can support it. A lot of times, you know, you haven't gotten the market feedback yet, so you might not even know what the market really wants until you've gone out and gotten that. So there's a lot of indicators that will tell you when you're ready. I think, you know, the most basic is just sort of a gut check, right? Like, you know, how are people going to react to this? And if your gut tells you that, you know, the product isn't ready or that your story isn't ready, don't go out with it yet.
How much does the surveys before you launch a product or it does help? How much does it help?
Well, it helps a lot if it's done right. You know, start with friends and family, broaden it from there. But you should be getting feedback, you know, from the very, you know, early days before you ever build anything. You know, you're bouncing the idea off of people, obviously. As you're building the product, you know, let people bang on it and give you honest feedback. And you know, so it's baby steps. And again, I don't mean to say, you know, don't do any marketing until you have, you know, 1 million users. But to be a little cautious. You know, I've seen too many clients, you know, be overly aggressive and it's backfired.
Hi. So two things. First, can you guys share a little bit? We all say that we want to measure, and it's a great goal that we measure, but we have so many tools to use these days. Why don't you share with us, like, the most cost-effective tool? Because each tool takes a lot of time to learn and to optimize, and just share from your experience. And the second thing is, if you can touch more on, specifically from my world, going on more conservative, like not tech-oriented markets, and what would you do in order to get to markets, not even consumers? We're going after laundromats, for instance. So just to give you like an exercise, how would you go and approach going into these markets, other than, of course, going and paying for publications and advertisements?
So, sorry, the first question was, what, like the metrics, tools, and what are the most effective tools out there? I'm not necessarily the best person to talk about this because we built an in-house tool for ourselves because we couldn't find anything that really did what we wanted. But I've seen people have a lot of success with two things. One, Optimizely. I don't know if you've seen this tool, but it's you know, it allows you to A/B test or split test pages with drag and drop. So like your marketing or product guy could do it instead of having to, you know, occupy the time of your technical folks. And it allows you to literally just drag and drop elements on a page and it'll reform the HTML and it'll tell you what side's performing well. It'll even tell you, which is the best part about Optimizely, it'll light up green when it thinks it has enough people coming through the funnel for statistical significance. So it makes it really easy. And I think the other tool that I've seen that's really good is Mixpanel. So those are two tools that I've seen that have worked well. I mean, I'll let these guys talk about it.
Online mainly, what you said.
And those are for web and mobile. Both of those work. Yeah, I think Optimizely works for mobile. Okay,
That way, so I don't know.
got it. Okay, but Mixpanel certainly will measure all your users and help you.
How do you measure sponsorship and things like that?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How do you measure sponsorship or non-online, non-website oriented stuff?
You have to get really kind of creative. So how do you measure non-online user acquisition? You know, one of the things you do is you sometimes create vanity URLs. That's like an old trick, right? So we'll run an ad for Soch, and we'll make the URL soch.com/secret. And people are like, what is that? You know, and they click over, and then they end up creating an account, and you can see that that's where they came from, and that only appeared on one specific ad. So you kind of use a little bit of psychology to figure out what are people going to actually want to type in, short enough, functional. How else do you measure sponsorship? Sometimes you can ask people. I've seen products that say, how did you hear about us? And that sometimes works as well. So those, you know, that's, I think, what I would say about kind of measuring things. And I'm happy to follow up directly afterwards if you want some more direction on kind of tools that we jump into.
Thank you for coming.
I'll actually add something to that question. Measurement is very, very difficult, as we all know. And the problem is because of one primary reason. To measure success or customer acquisition is actually multiple phases. You know how they say that you have to touch a prospect 7 times before they actually come to you, which means they probably read about it on a blog, they probably heard about it from a friend, they came to a website through an ad or through another campaign that you put up somewhere. So it's a very tough thing, and especially if it's offline and online marketing together and you're trying to measure it, it's very difficult. I'll leave it at that because it is complicated and you have to kind of see what works best in your industry and go with that.
And actually, you asked a question about laundromats. How would you reach laundromats? Businesses, like an example being like, how would you reach people who run laundromats? I guess you'd have to kind of like think hard about like what are the vendors they're buying from and the things that they're reading. They all have this set of chemicals that they buy that they clearly don't like concoct in house. Who are those vendors? How do you understand? What is occupying this type of person's brain all the time? How can I get in front of that? It's pretty much the same question as how do you get in front of 25-year-old women in the city of San Francisco, or how do you get in front of businesses that are in the sports world or something like that.
Are we all good? First of all, I want to say thank you. And my question is, what are some challenges that you see as a company that you're working with right now that you face to get the message out to your audience?
It really depends on, obviously, the situation and the audience. I think for us, the biggest challenge is making choices, right? Like, you have a limited amount of budget, you have a lot of people you want to reach. Like I was saying earlier, our customer base could be anyone from who's organizing a class to a conference to a music festival. These are all very different people in very different places and with very different mindsets and attitudes. So we have to make hard choices about where we can get the biggest bang for our buck. What are the vehicles we can afford in terms to reach the most amount of people? Where do we ultimately want our business to be, right? So like, if you think about where you want your business to be in 3 years, for us, it's like, what's the content that you want to have on there? And going after the right customers. And so it may not be the cheapest customer that you're going after, but it's the important one. But making choices, I think, is the hardest thing. Prioritization. Anyone else?
Hi, one of the sort of new marketing tips that I think was suggested earlier was this, you gave an example of the Google survey product. Another one that I've been tracking is like Servata, and they both do sort of the same thing. 1 6 questions, 1 2 questions. I was just curious, do you guys, what would you recommend as resources if you wanted to design a survey for targeted consumer intelligence, but you couldn't ask like 50 questions?
Well, quickly, I've had great experience with SurveyMonkey. It's cheap, easy.
I'm more about the design of the survey.
Oh.
I would actually still say SurveyMonkey's blog is actually, they do a really good job of trying to distill some of these complex like research questions down. A lot of these companies all have some sort of like white papers about asking questions and whatnot. At the end of the day, though, like the key to asking questions in the survey is to keep it simple. Like, don't overcomplicate things. Don't use a 10-point scale for no reason because you aren't going to know what to do with it. Especially for entrepreneurs and small companies, sometimes the best scale is just yes, no, maybe, or yes, no, I don't know. And like looking at positive and negative responses and throwing out the I don't knows, or like keep it simple. Like I worked in consumer goods my entire career up until this point, and we were afforded sophistication. You could do a conjoint analysis. You could buy all this fancy stuff. But at the end of the day, some of the best information you can gather is just the simple information, especially early on. So, don't overthink it.
This is our last question.
And actually, I would just add to that, ask yourself how you'll use the answers to these questions.
Of course. Yes.
If 90% of people said yes to question 1, would that change something for you, or was that like a warm-up question to take out? Just think about how you'll use that data.
In that same vein, think about what a good response would be, right? So benchmarking is really important when you think about asking these questions. If 60% of people say yes, is that high? Is that low? Is that good? Is that bad? Really think through what you're going to compare it against, Because you could easily generate a ton of data that you think is going to be meaningful, but if you haven't picked a benchmark that's meaningful, then it's just, you're going to get so lost, like being dragged around by information that you've gathered. So be really careful of that. It's really easy to just like forget that sometimes a high number doesn't necessarily mean something good. Like this is my classic example, and I just have to beat this to death. I'm sorry, it's so important. Like when we used to test products, and when I was at Clorox, and I used to do a ton of consumer testing, and there are certain product categories where you're always going to get people, 80% of people say they're definitely going to buy something. But everything you test, 80% of people say they're going to buy it. So, yeah, so it's like, okay, if everything we test is 80% of people, like somewhere around 80%, what is good? And so then you start using statistics and you break that out, right? Well, like, okay, the average is this. So if you're actually like 4 points above 80, you're significantly better. And that's actually a huge win, right? And sometimes statistics isn't necessary. Like when you're building a database, like just do very simple things, like break it up into thirds, top, middle, bottom. Like, what were the top 30%, what were the middle 30%, what's the bottom 30%? And sometimes that's just enough to get you started and moving, right? Like you don't have to make it fancy, don't have to make it complicated, just what you're gonna say is good or bad and hold yourself to it. Like it's really hard when you're on a line, but if you're just below the line, like, you know, if you didn't use statistics, just hold yourself to it.
Thank you.
Actually, I wanted to just address your question, kind of give you some tip real quick. There's actually a site my friend owns, Oliver owns a site called Survecast. And the biggest problem with surveys is you usually don't have an audience to test off of. Where do you find those people? Well, you could have a blog and you might get a few thousand users, but it's not a lot. Survecast, and I'll show you one other tip as well. You can actually create your blog and then you can broadcast it on their website, which is a syndicate. It allows you to get in front of millions of people and then ask a survey underneath your blog. So they go to your blog first, read it, come back and take your survey of 4 or 5 questions. You can gather that way. Another way I found personally that I've used, and I didn't hear anybody say it, so I wanted to just address it because I think every hero could use it. It's a B2B play. It allows you to use LinkedIn. LinkedIn allows you to join up to 50 groups specific to your market space. So for us, we're medical. So I joined all the medical. My other teammates have joined all the imaging centers, nursing homes, clinics, hospitals, etc., representing 5 to 10 million users, all specific to the C-level space. So CEOs of every major hospital in the world visit these blog forums. You write a blog, you have at least 20 to 30 creative blogs on your site. We have over 120 that we've written so far. I've written 90 myself. So, and I'm an engineer, so give you an idea. I taught myself to blog. What you do is once you do that, there's a protocol called add this, or Shareaholic that you can put on your blog or Dig or others. Once you click the LinkedIn share button, you can actually share it with all 50 groups by taking 30 seconds and selecting all those 50 groups instantly. And it shares your message. The key is having an amazing blog, a lot of blogs they can come back to every week and read, and number 2, having a lot of groups. Now the problem is most of these groups are private, so you have to have amazing content prior to actually promoting it. Otherwise they won't let you in the group to begin with. But the benefit is we have almost 10 million users potentially to see our blog every day. We have a huge amount of traffic, and we've only been out like 9 months. And we have almost every hospital in the world signing up to use our product. So if you're selling anything consumer or business based, you can do that by joining those target groups that facilitate interactions and ideas. The key is do not write about yourself, write about what your customer, their pain only. So figure out what that is and you're set. So I just want to share that. Thank you.
Great comment. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank our panelists and turn it over to Ankur.
Again, thanks a lot to all the panelists. Wonderful session. You know, one thing we all learned was we have to understand our audience. So we would like to understand our audience. How many folks here work for a startup? And how many are planning to work for a startup or start a company? All right. So one thing you've learned, at least, is TIE is very much around entrepreneurship. It's a community around entrepreneurship. If you would like to be involved in some way just to help build the community, we have volunteers meet next Wednesday, March 13th. It's at Yetizen, which is a gaming accelerator about a block from here, 540 Howard, 6:30 in the evening Wednesday. I'll drop my business cards here. You can just RSVP if you're interested in joining. Essentially, we just meet for an hour and a half, just plan out some of the activities and how to just give more support to entrepreneurs here and just to expand the community. Again, thanks everyone for coming. Wonderful to have you, and look forward to having you at our next event.